Very good afternoon to you. In her round of recent local radio interviews, the Prime Minister was asked on BBC Lancashire about her decision to lift the moratorium on fracking, a decision that the government made not because the scientific evidence on safety has changed or people consented to it, but because the government decided that, and I'm quoting here, tolerating a higher degree of risk and disturbance appears to us to be in the national interest. Liz Truss did, though, say that there would need to be local consent for fracking to go ahead. Here she is on BBC Lancs.
What does local consent look like, Prime Minister?
Well, the Energy Secretary will be laying out in more detail exactly what that looks like, but it does mean making sure there is local support for going ahead. And I can assure
it sounds like you don't know.
And I can assure Mark Menzies, well, there are various detailed issues to be worked through, but I can assure Mark Menzies that I will make sure there is local consent if we are to go ahead.
Consent will be won, suggests the Prime Minister. How, if the arguments aren't persuasive enough to convince those locally to do it? Well, the answer seems to be cash. Cold, hard, crisp cash. The Telegraph reports that the government is going to back a plan to put forward by some of the fracking companies that would mean that those companies could go door to door in local areas where they want to frack and twist your arm by offering you up to £1,000. Cash incentives could then be offered with the exploratory drilling allowed to go ahead if more than 50% of households in the local vicinity give their approval. Should gas be found, shale gas be found, and the removal of that is possible, companies would then offer those who own the land under which fracking takes place royalties to share in the proceeds. I wonder whether that instinctively and instantly sounds to you a little bit grubby. It reminds me of the sort of the oil rush in America at the turn of the 20th century. The town of Spindletop in Texas, where they struck a huge amount of oil and the prospectors all rushed into the town. The local residents were paid for lodging, they were paid for food, they were paid to move out of their homes in some cases. Whole industries then grew up around this town, the bars, the markets, some of the more, longer standing trades, the brothels. They sprung up in these kind of towns as well. It was a bit of a free-for-all. The local people profited up until the oil dried up and everyone up sticks and left. Is your part of Surrey or Sussex or Lancashire or Yorkshire the new Spindletop? Would you be persuaded to let it become that if you got £1,000 up front and then a share of the profits? If you're not going to be persuaded by the arguments, would the money help? Is that a legitimate form of consent? And it's actually sharing in the profits that could be made potentially from these sites. Is that not quite fair? 0345 6060 973 if you know that fracking is a possibility and has been mooted in an area near to you. Would £1,000 help you along the way to give consent to it? Let's speak to Councillor Jonathan Owen, who is leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council, a Conservative council. Thank you for coming on the programme. Would you see yourself giving consent for fracking to happen round where you are?
Hi, Tom. Actually, no. Just this week, we've again, as a council, agreed cross-party that we are opposed to fracking in East Yorkshire. We're on exactly the opposite coast to Lancashire. If you draw a straight line across the country, you hit us. And so we have, shale underneath us. We've been through this a couple of years ago, all the arguments for and against. And talking back to the American experience in the oil rush or whatever, it made me smile because, we do have bars and market towns, infrastructure and things now, and it will be the exact opposite. We're looking to maybe destroying those if we move down this route. So we're strongly opposed, but for practical reasons, because most people that object tend to be quite well-educated people. There's a bit of NIMBYism about it, but we have to admit we sit on all our water is supplied through a water aquifer in East Yorkshire. It's 1,000 square miles is our area, and we have to drill through that if you did any exploratory fracking, and that's been the main reason that we would object to moving forward. But when you talk about offering people, I see them as bribes at the end of the day. It's a bit like 6 pieces of silver, to carry out something that I don't think basically people believe in. I've got many grandchildren, young grandchildren growing up, and £1,000 is not something I'd like to be paid for their security 20 and 30 years from now.
Even if as the fracking companies suggest, this is very safe. It happens in other parts of the world. There are risks, obviously, but they can be mitigated by the practices that they undertake. And wouldn't it be fairer if those places in the neighbourhood of a fracking site got a share in the profits that were made?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if at the end of the day everything we've done still results in fracking, then I would expect something for the local community to come out of it. But it's not something I would wish to endorse in any way. I'm not convinced that the energy security of this country will be helped that much by fracking. I'm not even sure that some of the main companies, from what I've heard anecdotally, are in a position to want to actually move forward and continue with their original investigations at this point.
There does seem to be a bit of an unstoppable force and an immovable object, if I can put it like that, Councillor. You are the immovable object. You don't think people are going to consent to this. Liz Truss seems to be the unstoppable force of saying fracking is going to happen. We are going to be energy self-sufficient by whatever date. Something's going to give. Which do you suspect it might be first?
Well, I hope it's not us, because we are probably one of the most energy secure countries in the world at the moment, from what I understand. I think investment moving forward should be in green energy. It goes against everything my own party was saying a couple of years ago, actually, in terms of where future investment should be. So I'm hoping we're the immovable object that will be able to stand firm and oppose any sort of progress in this way.
It might be rather unfortunate, given you are a Conservative council and you're the leader of that council, but it sounds to me, Jonathan, that you might accidentally have fallen into being part of this anti-growth coalition that Liz Truss talked about in her conference speech.
No, I'm far from it. I mean, we have so much investment in this area that, I mean, growth is absolutely great. We're part of the Humber and that area where there is huge investment at the moment. So in terms of economic investment and growth, I'm fully supportive of Liz Truss's
Just not this version.
Not this particular version. And it's better. I don't think I'm alone in that across the country of all political parties in various local authorities. I mean, when it comes to having to offer people to make a choice, I think maybe the argument's already been lost.
Good to speak to you. Appreciate your time. Councillor Jonathan Owen, leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council. Lorraine Allinson's listening to that, pro-fracking campaigner, businesswoman based in North Yorkshire. Thank you for coming on the programme, Lorraine. You heard Jonathan there suggesting, one, this money is akin to a bribe, and that the arguments are over. The consent isn't going to be given. What say you? Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, this is nothing new about giving communities payments. They do it for wind farms. So the hysteria around these payments is false, really. And when I hear, such as the councillor speaking, you know, he's still into the sensationalist and the emotive campaign information rather than the facts. And the anti-fracking movement, backed by the big green NGOs, has actually done a tremendous job at destroying our own shale gas industry, yet we are happy to import 57% of our gas, and most of that will be fracked. In 2004, we were actually self-sufficient for gas. And because we've got all this anti-oil and gas rhetoric, they are the ones that caused this, because the oil and gas industry daren't invest anymore because they can get stopped from trying to test for oil and gas by the rhetoric or by politicians. It's a political decision. It's not based on facts. Well,
I just wonder, Lorraine, whether the argument that you're putting forward there, that there is a lot of shale gas underneath our feet, that we would be energy self-sufficient were we to extract it and use it, I can see that we will argue that until you're blue in the face, perhaps, but I don't think that argument is going to persuade people, because it doesn't seem to have done.
Well, you're battling against a lot of this emotive language about earthquakes and contaminated water. I mean, even that councillor said about, it means drilling through the aquifer. They've drilled through the aquifer to get oil and gas for decades. How do they think they get deep down into the earth? The aquifer is only about 300 metres below the surface. I mean, it's a nonsense what a lot of people say. They don't understand the process.
Well, the problem is that the government's own language suggests that there is a higher degree of risk here. In fact, the government says tolerating a higher degree of risk and disturbance appears to us to be in the national interest. So I don't think anyone, even the government, is suggesting that there wouldn't be higher risk.
I think the main thing would be when they're setting up the well site, all the traffic, but that's only temporary. Same with the drilling. I think the risk is not doing this. And to say that we have energy security, as the councillor said, is an absolute nonsense. Look at the state we're in. Do we want to rely on foreign states with dubious human rights issues, or do we want to produce our own oil and gas, which is actually 4 times better in emissions than importing gas?
Well, there is still some debate about just how much shale gas is under our feet, how much actually the country could gain from extracting it. And, Lorraine, it seems as if the government cannot generate consent, none of this will happen anyway.
Well, it was going to be difficult to generate consent because of the anti-fracking campaign with its emotive arguments. But if people would allow, you've got to do several test wells initially to see how much is down there. And we can all talk till we're blue in the face saying how much we think down there. They need to do it. And I believe Ineos, that company, has offered to do a test well and frack it and everything and have the liability for it, if anything, which I don't think would, but went wrong with it. So that needs to happen. If these people are so sure that it's going to be a disaster, then why are they frightened of allowing them to do one test well? That would end the debate if it was a disaster. But it won't.
Yeah, but I'm not sure people are willing to take the disaster, that's why.
Well, because it won't be a disaster. I mean, I just listen to so many people.
If that's what you're testing, you're willing to risk the disaster. And again, that's not what people are after here.
Yeah, but hydraulic fracturing of wells has happened for decades. The Witch Farm down in Dorset has fracked wells there. These are deeper. They use much more water to reach down there. But it's not a new process.
OK. Lorraine, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you, Lorraine Allinson, pro-fracking campaigner, businesswoman from North Yorkshire. There are lots of different parts of the country that have potential for fracking, that have potential large amounts of shale gas underneath the rock there. And so I guess some of you may have the potential for someone from the fracking company to come and on your door and maybe offer you £1,000 just to have the consent bought to allow them to start drilling. I wonder whether, even though you might be implacably opposed now, a little cash incentive, what might that do? Might that loosen the wheels a bit? Might that change your mind somewhat? Or is it akin to, as the councillor was suggesting earlier, it looks more like a bribe? 0345 6060 973. Come to your calls after this. Tom Swarbrick on LBC, 418. Joanne, you've called from Devon on the subject of, not being bribed for consenting to frack, but maybe being offered some shares in the profits.
Yes, I do think it's bribery, and I think it is a cynical ploy by the government to pursue their agenda because they are determined to get it through. If it's an honest consent, why not ask people without the strings of finance? And I think anybody would give who's really caring about it doesn't need to be paid to agree. They will just agree.
Why
Personally, sorry.
I totally see how it is purer to agree with the arguments and the evidence. I see that. But in the event that people could make some money from it, why not use money as an incentive?
It doesn't feel like an incentive to me. I can only tell you how my instinct reacts. And to me, I would not accept money. It seems unethical.
Well, it strikes me, Joanne, if I'm trying to imagine that being in that position of someone knocking on the door saying, hello, I'm from Big Frack Limited or whatever. Yeah. These are the arguments. I go, yeah, I've heard about that. Not sure about the water, not sure about the tremors. Don't think the science has moved on the safety point a lot. But what else have you got, Mr. Big Frack? And he says, well, I've got £1,000. Would you like £1,000? I would think, well, that makes you sound more dodgy, actually.
It does. But it just feels wrong. That's all I can say about it.
Would it feel?
It doesn't feel. Go on, sorry.
Would it feel closer to being right if, rather than given a cash bung, I'm calling it a bung, that you got if you lived locally to one of these? How local, I don't know, but let's say you live locally to one of these sites, you would get a share in the profits forever.
But that's just the same. It's still buying your consent.
All right. Joanne, I appreciate it. Thank you. Joy's a new caller in Irby in Lancashire. Joy.
Hi, I'm actually not from Irby. I'm from Slack, which is 3 miles from Irby. It's in North Yorkshire. But
totally beg your pardon.
No, it's okay. I literally live just 3 miles away, but I'm over the border. So the Irby is in Lancashire, and it's actually, there is a report on the geologist warns of toxic risks from fracking the Boland Shale.
Yeah.
It's on the internet, and I'm extremely concerned, as is an awful lot of people in this area. Money, no amount of money that's going to solve toxic waste or toxic water, and the amount of pollution that all the vehicles, because I've heard about the site in Preston, causes. But if you want, I'm a genuine caller, literally 3 miles away from the AB.
And this is
I've lived here for about 7 years.
This is an area in and around the Bowland Shale site.
Yeah.
And so, Joy, how close in sort of miles terms would you be to an actual drill or a well?
I don't know whereabouts the actual drills are, to be honest. But if I look at the Bowland Shale, it's throughout the whole of Yorkshire,
Yeah,
Lancashire.
it's a big area.
It's a massive area. I know that they did an awful lot of work around Preston and Blackpool. As you can see, I've lived round here for 30 odd years and know, it's the most beautiful place. Because I was a nurse.
Well, let me ask you this, Joy. Let me put this to you.
It's so frightening,
I'm going to use this term as a way to perhaps get under your skin, Joy, rather than me believing it. But your NIMBYism is holding Britain back. You are, Joy, part of the anti-growth coalition. You are not submitting to the needs of this nation, which is to become energy self-sufficient. We absolutely need to do that. Fracking is a way to do that. Joy, why won't you just be pro-growth?
Well, I am really pro-growth.
But not if it's near you.
There are limits to this pro-growth. Where actually this area is a very conservative area with a big C and a small c. So for me to phone up I've never done this before in my life, but I can tell you that the amount of people that feel so scared of the fracking happening in North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, Lancashire, and I know this lady earlier said about that in other countries they do fracking. Yes, they do in America, but there are no, it's a massive country as America. There are thousands and thousands of miles with no population at all. Mm-hmm. If we had a big country, yes, frack away, frack and,
Frack and be damned.
Yeah. But we don't. We have a tiny country and a very, there's a lot of people living in this area.
All right, Joy, I'm not sure the people from Big Frack Limited or whoever are going to get much joy coming around your house and trying to offer you some money to do it, because you seem very, very set. Possibly even if the science changes, which it hasn't yet on the safety point, but the government are talking about the need to take these risks in order to produce growth. Ken's in Bristol. Ken.
Hiya.
Hi,
Tom. Yep. Okay. You want my views, obviously. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that this same nonsense is coming back about water pollution and all these other kind of problems. There is a genuine issue with seismic issues. That could be not allow it to go ahead. But the trouble is, there's so much disinformation about this. I basically ran a campaign against Friends of the Earth, and one is on all counts. Basically, water pollution, that's looked at by the Environment Agency. There's been 1 million wells drilled in the UK, most of them going somewhere near aquifers. And basically, they know what they're doing. They've been running the North Sea for the last 45-something years. They have very skilled drilling engineers who know what's going on.
So someone somewhere, Ken, might be able to form the argument, put the point across rather better than it has at the moment, to persuade people that this is quite safe.
Well, drilling-wise, it's absolutely safe. The trouble is, they scare people with this idea that, they're going to pollute the water. There's a 2010 Infrastructure Act that was passed, and it was European law anyway, but it's passed into UK law. You are not allowed to put any chemicals down any well with any possible damage, and not in any concentration at all. The only chemical they used, for instance, up in Preston New Road in Lancashire, was polyacrylamide. It's a food additive.
Well, Ken, you make your points very well, and you speak with the experience as being a former engineer.
Yeah, 12 years in drilling, yes.
Why do you think it is that that the argument that you're putting forward hasn't taken hold amongst the minds of people like Joy, and could it? Could people be persuaded back round?
Well, I don't know, but I've done my bit to persuade, and a lot of people are very happy when my complaints against the liars that are friends of the earth were taken to task and shown to what they were saying was complete and utter nonsense. And a lot of this is originally comes from Russian disinformation.
Oh, gosh, I don't. Well, I don't know. I genuinely don't know about that, Ken. If I'm in all honesty, I don't. I can see why people do have concerns because the chap we spoke to who lived near one of the fracking sites, he felt a tremor in his home during the period that they were fracking. So I can see why people are absolutely nervous, concerned, and worried about it, particularly when the science or the British Geological Survey report didn't change much in its opinion about whether it was much safer to do it. Tina, thanks for holding on the line. You want to talk about fracking? Hi.
Hi, yeah, no worries at all. I just want to come back really on what Alison said earlier in the call. She said, why don't we just let them give it a try? I live in Blackpool, about 6 miles from the only site that was fracked, at Preston New Road.
Yes.
And I can tell you, they have been trying for 11 years. And in those 11 years, neither the geology or the process has changed. So what new would be discovered if we did just give it a try? And also back to that compensation, Blackpool is rated as one of the the highest poverty coastal towns. So if they offer us a financial incentive, you can bet that people will want to bite their hand off. But that's not support, that's desperation. They're going through really hard times, the whole country is. And you're going
that's up to, listen, I agree, but that's up to the person who's being offered the money, isn't it, ultimately?
Absolutely. I agree with that too. Of course it is. Every individual should make their own choice. But then we have to ask the question that if the individuals get the money, who then covers the cost for the damage, let's just say, to our roads, which we know that will happen on the construction of a site. We've seen what the volume of traffic is and the heavy vehicles that travel on the roads when they're creating a fracking site. I was there every day for 1,000 days.
Wow. Well, Tina, listen, I totally I take your point about the disruption that it could cause. But that argument, particularly from disruption about the traffic and the noise, can be made about the building of a new hospital or the building of onshore wind or, the building of new homes, that kind of form of NIMBYism that I think Liz Truss's government is taking aim at to say, no, we need to ditch that and we need to get building or moving or growing.
I totally get that, and NIMBYism. I just we quite often, as you will have heard Liz Truss say on her second day, they're in government when she said about going ahead with fracking, and they called us. What do they call us?
Luddites.
Hysterical Luddites. Yes, yeah. Hysterical Luddites paid by Russia. I mean, what an insult! How awful! But having said that, I haven't met a single person who only cares about their backyard, and if you did, that's where our kids play.
Well, this is why, Tina, thank you, this is why growth, quote unquote, is very hard, because it's quite difficult to gain consent from various different communities for lots of house building or onshore wind or whatever it might be. It's quite difficult. It requires careful argument. It requires persuasion. It doesn't mean that you make them the enemy, because they're probably less likely to give you that consent. A lot of the parts of growth that Liz Truss is trying to promote are actually pretty unpopular. And so you need quite a lot of political capital and goodwill behind you to help the unpopular decisions that you're putting through actually happen. And I'm not sure Liz Truss has got that. I think she spent that in about 14 days. Tina, thank you. 0345